Going back to that breaking news, the DOJ releasing the complete audio recordings and transcripts of Deputy AG Todd Blanche's interview with Jeffrey Epstein's associate, Ghislaine Maxwell. Blanche took to X to announce the release. Here's what he said, saying the Justice Department is acting in the interest of transparency. The Deputy Attorney General spoke to Maxwell earlier this summer. She is currently serving 20 years behind bars for her role in Epstein's sex trafficking scheme. Here with us now, defense attorney and former prosecutor Brian Claypool. Brian, good to see you. Thank you for coming on for this breaking news. I'm going to bring you back in a sec, but first, I do want to ask you about Ghislaine Maxwell and what Blanche is saying on Twitter and these transcripts that were just released a short while ago.
Look, I think this is a great move by Todd Blanche and the DOJ. Remember, just a couple of weeks ago, they filed a motion to have the grand jury testimony in the Epstein investigation released, right? What does that tell you? That the DOJ wants to have transparency. They want to find out if there's any other information that might lead to any co-conspirators that led to child sexual abuse. So I think this is a good move. But remember, the court denied that a few days ago, right? So that hampered the ability to have transparency, a pathetic excuse by the judge saying it might affect other proceedings. The public interest here trumps everything. I work on child sexual abuse cases. So this is a great result. And one more quick point. I'm sure Maxwell's lawyers had to agree to this too, right? They had a long meeting. Her lawyers had to sign off on this, and that's a good sign as well.
All right, don't go too far, like I mentioned, Brian. I'm going to come back to you in a moment. And let's bring back defense attorney and former prosecutor Brian Claypool. Thanks for not going too far, Brian. What do you make of the news last night that Eric Menendez was denied bail? Do you agree with that decision, especially looking at some of the infractions that he may have made behind bars?
Yeah, I mean, I think like a lot of people, I was a little bit surprised, but that was based on emotion, right? Because you mentioned it, over the last year or two, we've had a groundswell of social support for the Menendez brothers. I think you had the Netflix series. You had a lot of people talking about what's the effect of child sexual abuse on victims and how they behave. And I think this was the first time we've seen in, what, a year or two, where the facts and the law were applied to the Menendez brothers, not emotion and social support. So if you're focusing just on the facts and the law, I think this was the right decision. Why? Because the parole commissioner went into great detail about why both Eric and Lyle didn't walk away. Remember, Eric was 18, Lyle was 21. And the commissioner was like, look, you guys could have chosen to walk away. You've got a great social network. Why didn't you go get help and live with somebody else rather than kill your parents? And there were a lot of questions asked of Eric that are going to be asked of Lyle about why did you go out and buy a gun? Why did you kill your parents? For example, why did you burglarize a home a year prior to that? Why did you have 8 or 9 infractions in jail? Are you taking accountability for this? These are all the factors that the parole commissioner is going to look into to determine whether Lyle is an unreasonable risk of harm to others. And I think at the end of the day, you're going to see the same result with Lyle that you saw with Eric. One other quick point I wanted to make is, look, the parole commissioners went into an important point. Were these 2 young men in imminent harm of danger? That was a big, and the parole commissioner was diving into that. And that's what made this really chilling. Because think about it. You hardly ever hear 2 people convicted of murder like this really testifying before a parole commissioner, and they were confronted with that fact as well. So I think all said, I think Lyle's going to be in the same boat, and then we'll revisit this in 3 years.
Yeah, we'll probably find out in a few hours. Brian pointed this out, and I want to pose it to you too, Brian. If parole is denied, the brothers still have some path to freedom in 3 years, or that case where Brian Enton mentioned the case being dropped completely. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, I think that the parole officers are signaling to the Menendez brothers that you need to stay out of trouble for the next 3 years, right? You need to show compassion for what happened. Let me give you an example real quick. What the parole commissioner said, these exact words to Eric Menendez yesterday at the end. He said, you've got 2 options. One is you can have a pity party for yourself and keep feeling sorry for yourself and have a self-fulfilling prophecy for the rest of your life, right? Or the second option is stay out of trouble, do good things in jail for the next 3 years, and show true remorse for the generational trauma that you've committed on the family and others related to the family. So he narrowed down to two choices. You make the choice. And I think that if Eric does that in 3 years, you might see a different result. And the same thing with Lyle.
You make a really good point. When you set emotion aside and you just base it on the law, then the decision is a bit more understandable why parole was denied. Brian Claypool, we'll find out what happens with Lyle in a few hours. Thank you again.
You bet. Thanks for having me.